Hey, my name is Josh Download. Feels good to finally say my real name. If you remember my Quake 3 Revolutions or Space Hulk video, you probably remember me saying that my name was Binky. That was the name I got in high school because someone couldn't remember my name and they just shouted Binky at me and I happened to turn around. And yeah, they meant Binky from Arthur. Your boy. Anyway, it's been a few hundred years, but I'm back to talk about another game, Mystic Quest, for the Game Boy. Also known as Final Fantasy Adventure, or Seiken Densetsu. This is for the Game Boy game club known as Yokoi Kids. You can find them on Bluesky right here. Or you can find them on their website right here. Both of which are in the description. I'm not well versed in the world of mana. I've got a couple of the games, but I'm not even close to an expert. However, this game is the first in the series. Not a traditional Final Fantasy game, despite the namesake in the US. This game is an action RPG. You traverse the land in designated areas and attack monsters in real time, a la Legend of Zelda. But you grow levels, choose where you increase your stats, and play through a sprawling story, which is very Final Fantasy, or Dragon Quest, my personal favourite of the two. And when I say sprawling, I mean it. This game is way longer than I initially thought, but I'll get to that later. So, the game starts, you pick a name for your character as well as a name for girl. There's a whole wall of text to begin the game as well, but to be honest, I didn't read it. So of course, I went with Josh, because that's my name. And for girl, I went with Yuki, in reference to the alien robot Yuki Nagato. And you're thrust into a fight immediately. If you've never played a game in the Mana series before, you might be a bit confused by the combat. I definitely was when I played Children of Mana back in high school. Down the bottom of the screen is a long bar that gradually fills up. I think it's called the action bar, or something like that. When it fills up all the way and you press the attack button, A in this case, you do a powerful special move. For the most part, however, that bar will take way too long to fill, so you'll be swinging your sword whenever you get an opportunity. This can be detrimental though, as the higher the bar gets when you swing your sword, the more damage you deal. This fighting mechanic is common across all the games in the Mana series, and man, initially I did not get it at all. I remember just spamming the button and not being able to kill even the weakest monsters. Pretty embarrassing now, but I don't know man, I was a dickhead 16-year-old. So, now you can fight. That's great. All the bosses have pretty basic patterns of attack, and if you're more patient than me, you'll probably notice them before you die. Multiple times. But for the most part, you'll be killing random guys and traversing the world, going from one destination to another. Where those destinations are on the map though, oh yeah, there is a map, is anyone's guess. It's genuinely unimportant to look at the map. Each designated area is pretty straightforward, and if you kill everything on every screen, as much as possible, you'll have enough money to never need to backtrack. You buy new weapons and items from stores, which are marked as such. You go to towns, talk to people, and stay at inns. And you explore caves, dungeons, airships, etc., which will be the bulk of your time with this game. Speaking of the dungeons, they're literally built to be mazes. It can be quite taxing fighting the same things over and over and exploring similar looking rooms just to happen upon where you need to go. Or even worse, finding a boss you can't beat without a specific item or weapon also found in the dungeon. Or even worse than that, running out of matic or key, having to leave the dungeon to find a shop, then going back into the dungeon and doing it all again. Considering this is a Game Boy game, these kinds of goofs can really cost you some AA batteries. Make sure you buy a spare key and matic, which can be used to break rocks and find secret passages in dungeons. Other weapons also have a secondary function. The sickle can cut vines and things. The chain can attach onto wooden posts, like the hookshot. The battle axe can cut down trees. The star acts as the matic, and so on. I was actually able to get through a bunch of the game without knowing that, until I needed to cut down some trees. I thought I'd missed something, which it turns out I did. Certain enemies can only be killed by a sword as well, which is genuinely annoying, honestly. No, game, I'm not going to switch weapons every single time I hear that damn sound, which means this weapon can't hurt that thing. It takes way too long. So I just ran past the ones that needed to be killed by a sword. Until way later in the game where I just switched the sword, even though it was a bit weaker. Oh yeah, and your companions, whenever you find them, have abilities that you can activate by asking them. Like healing HP from status conditions or telling you they can use a weapon's special ability, which I never did. So, that's it for gameplay. Well, what's the story like in this game? Well, there is a story, I suppose. A lot of story, in fact. I just didn't really pay attention. You're a prisoner of the Dark Lord, who looks like a Digimon, and you're made to fight monsters in a coliseum. You manage to escape thanks to a guy named Willy. Yes, Willy. And then he dies, which is probably for the best. You jump off a cliff to escape Mr. Digimon and wake up in a new area. Soon, you meet Yuki Nagato, and her mate died, who was never mentioned again. She was heading to a town that you escort her to called Topple. You find a Geminite who tells you to go to Wendell to find someone else. And honestly, that kind of formula repeats throughout the whole game. You have to go to a place, find a person, something happens, then you have to go to another place to find another person. Rinse, lather, repeat. There are several puzzles along the way, which is sweet, but the story is a very loose mechanic to force the player to venture to different locations. I can see how people could get into the story, and the reasons for everything, but it genuinely didn't grip me. It's not like I'm playing Sweet Home for the Famicom, which ironically is a much more basic story than Mystic Quest. But it's told to you in a spoon-fed manner, with the hot soup of story. There are several heavy things that happen during the story. A lot of people die, and sometimes by your hand. But sometimes you meet people who say they're an old friend of yours, even though you've never seen them in the game before. You're also mentioned as the chosen one at a literal random point in the game, just to set up looking for a specific sword. Yeah, I think this would have worked better as a Splatterhouse situation. You're just a guy who goes through hell to stop a warlord, and you just happen to use the fabled sword because it's the only thing that can do it. It seems shoehorned in because it was the style at the time. Never mind, story doesn't really matter to me, and if you play it yourself, I'm sure you might get into it more than I did. In fact, I hope you do. Besides going in on the story, I do have some other things to say. The music is probably one of the best parts of the game, along with the gameplay, though the music in the dungeons, caves, whatever, can get dull if you hear it a lot, which I did. But in general, it makes you feel like you're on an adventure, which is exactly what it should do. The sound effects are also fantastic. I especially like using the Matic on a wall to find a secret passage. Yeah, pretty satisfying. However, enemies don't blat with the same satisfaction as Zelda. A minor gripe, honestly, because killing dudes is still fun, which is why I kept doing it on every screen. Except when I had to continually switch weapons, as I previously stated. In fact, sound plays a role in this game. How you find out there's a secret passage is by attacking the wall, as it sounds different. A harp is used to clear poison gas to progress. Yes, you heard me. And generally speaking, it's important to have the speakers up. Along with how nice the game sounds, it also looks really pretty, especially for a Game Boy game. Even though the Dark Lord looks like a Digimon, every boss is crafted so well. Every enemy is adorable in that chibi kind of way. The trees, the towns, the oceans, the caves, the minecarts, the moat, the door, everything is meticulously drawn, it seems. Care was put into making this game look as memorable as it had every right to be. Which brings me neatly to my final points. This game should have been a smash hit. Even more importantly, I should have owned it as a kid. I would have loved it. Around this time, sales numbers are difficult to come by, and when they are reported on, they're difficult to trust. However, apparently, this game sold around 200,000 copies outside of Japan, according to Square during an interview with Electronic Gaming Monthly back in 1994. It's funny to note, from my travels in the game collecting scene over the last 15 years, I always knew the story as they named it Final Fantasy Adventure to sell more copies in the West. However, according to this interview with EGM, it was always called Final Fantasy Gaiden. Well, subtitled at least. Seems to me that Square was trying to make a new series, which they did, and it worked out considering all the sequels. Weird speculation about the completely redundant differing name discussions aside, this game stands well enough on its own, and it's genuinely fun to play. Most people will probably get more of a kick out of the story than me, and I do not hold this against the game at all. It's fun, it's long, it's gorgeous. The only problem is the price of admission. The game is fairly expensive, for a physical copy these days. Luckily, it's available as part of the collection of Mana on Switch, like this one. Or digitally on modern consoles, thankfully. God damn, you remember the Wii Virtual Console?
Virtual Console.
Anyway, I recommend it. I barely showed much of what this game has to offer because it's so spoiler heavy. But even if you don't care about the story like me, it's still a blast to play. Those dungeons can drag a bit, so I recommend you stretch out your play sessions. Thanks for watching. I'll be sure to make another video soon. That was it.